I'd like to hand over to Professor Harald von Witzke. He is the president of the Humboldt University Forum for Food and Agriculture. And by training, he is economist and chair for international agriculture, trade and development at the Humboldt University in Berlin, one of the most renowned universities in Germany. And he has been working for many years on subjects like food security and agricultural trade and economic development. So, and this morning he is presenting us the presentation on EU agricultural production and trade. Can more production efficiency decrease land grabbing outside of Europe? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to be here today. What I would like to do in my presentation is pretty well expressed in the title of my presentation, because I want to tell the story of what has happened in the European Union, because the European Union has neglected innovation and productivity growth in agriculture. More specifically, I want to address 4 issues that I've listed here and that I don't want to read to you in the interest of time, and then we'll draw some conclusions from this. And one conclusion that we're going to draw is that the European Union has become the single most important political entity that does land grabbing in agriculture. It's not an actual land grabbing, much like China or Saudi Arabia and some other countries are doing, but it is, as we shall see, and as I term it, virtual land grabbing that the European Union is doing for reasons that will become obvious, I hope. Let me begin with the agricultural treadmill. The agricultural treadmill is an economic process that has characterized world agriculture roughly between 1870 and the year 2000. And what we've seen during that period of time was a rather rapid growth in the global demand for food for essentially 2 reasons. One has been rapid population growth. In 1900, we had 1.5 billion humans living on this planet. By 2000, this number had gone up to 6 billion. And the second variable that matters in this regard is a rapid growth in per capita food consumption in today's rich countries. So the global demand for food has gone up dramatically during the time period that I've mentioned here. However, the food supply could be expanded by even more. And again, there are 2 key reasons for this. One has been an expansion of the acreage for farming. This process has slowed down significantly in the second half of the 20th century. It has by no means come to a standstill, as we know, but it has slowed down significantly. Much more important for global productivity, global production growth has been the growth in agricultural productivity. And there have been times in the 1960s, 1970s that productivity growth in world agriculture was so large, so high, so swift that we refer to this period also as the Green Revolution. And the consequence of all this, of course, had to be that the long-term trend in real food prices had to be negative. And that I have illustrated in the next slide. This is a price index, a compound price made up out of the most important agricultural commodities, at least from a European perspective. And it has been deflated, so inflation has been taken out of it. And as you can see, the straight dotted line, that is the long-term trend of agricultural commodity prices roughly between 1900 and 1990. And it has a negative slope, so prices have tended to go down with significant fluctuations over time, as is evident by this slide. And of course, all of you know the economic consequences of this development, namely the phenomenon of agricultural income disparity, lagging behind of agricultural income growth relative to the rest of the economy, and along with it, a declining workforce in agriculture. Now, when we go back in time a little farther than 1870, and that's what I've done on the next slide, then we see a completely different picture. This slide depicts the price of grains in Europe between 1200 and 1900, and prices have been deflated by dividing actual prices through by the price of silver to take inflation out. And as you can see, there is a clear-cut positive trend in this timeline. This was, if you will, the golden times of agriculture. However, it also was the times during which David Ricardo and Thomas Robert Malthus came up with their dismal predictions about the future of mankind, because they lived in Britain during this time of rapid price increases in wheat and other agricultural commodities, and they concluded from this that the future of mankind should be characterized by recurring food crises, during which humankind shrinks because people starve to death, or more likely that they kill each other over the ever scarcer natural resource of that is agricultural land. When I look into the crystal ball that's sitting on my desk in my office in Berlin, then I see the return of Malthus and Ricardo for the next few decades at least, because what we've seen since the turn of the millennium is that the global demand has outstripped the growth in supply, so we've seen a positive, an upward trend in international commodity prices with significant fluctuations, much like in the past. In fact, what we expect to happen is that the global demand for food will double in the first half of the 21st century. And again, there are two key reasons for this. One is a continued rapid population growth. We just said in 2000, we had 6 billion humans living on this planet. By 2050, this number may be well at 9 to 9.5 billion. And the other one is actually something positive, and that's that we've seen in many developing and newly industrializing countries. Economic growth, per capita income growth that in these countries still leads to a significant increase in per capita food consumption. So the global demand for food will continue to grow at a rapid pace. However, supply of food is not likely to keep pace with the growth in demand for a variety of reasons. And the first reason that I've listed here is an obvious one, and that is that on a global scale, the land that is available for farming is limited. The best soils, the most productive land already is being farmed. In many parts of the world, there are no major land reserves left that could be used for farming, or where there are, such as the tropical rainforests, we don't want to use that land for farming for environmental reasons. So we've estimated that with sustained high prices or favorable prices for farmers, cropland, I should say, in the world can be expanded by about 7% between 2000 and 2020. And the next slide depicts where these land reserves are. As you can see, most of that is in Latin America, that's Brazil and Argentina. But I also want to point out Canada, because Canada is a very good example for the fact that the land that is going into production with sustained high agricultural commodity prices will tend to be less productive than the land that was already being farmed when prices were lower. As the land that is available for food production is limited, the production growth necessary to meet the rapidly growing needs of the world must come, for the most part, from productivity growth of the land already being farmed. And this will be difficult to accomplish, because what we've seen since the Green Revolution of the 1960s, 1970s has been a steady decline in annual productivity growth in world agriculture. We are now down to 1%. In the European Union, we are down to 0.6% productivity growth. There are two key reasons for this development. One is that with our traditional breeding methods, we have increasingly captured the productive potential of our crops and of our livestock, such that additional productivity growth can only be realized through ever-increasing investment in agricultural research. And the second reason is that exactly this hasn't happened. Agricultural research has been cut back significantly. And if you just look at the rough numbers, this decline in agricultural research investment isn't too big. But if you look at these numbers in more detail, then you see that the part of agricultural research that focuses on productivity growth is the part that has been cut back significantly. Just to give you an example, how severe the cutbacks in public agricultural research investments have been, let me give you the example of my own College of Agriculture. We had, when I joined Humboldt University, 63 professors in agricultural sciences. We are now down to 12. Other reasons matter also, and that is that water is becoming ever scarcer and thus more expensive, which of course acts to slow down productivity growth further. And then what we observe in many rich countries, not only there but mostly there, is that there is a growing demand, public demand for quality components in food and agriculture. And this simply means for us in agricultural research that we, in our attempts to make world agriculture even more productive than it already is, that we have to take into account additional constraints of sustainability, natural resource and environmental protection. And from a societal point of view, rightly so, but essentially taking account of these additional constraints acts to slow down productivity growth further. Then we observe significant growth in bioenergy, crop production around the globe, in particular in the US and Brazil. In 2008, about 30 million hectares of cropland were planted to crops for bioenergy production. To put this into perspective, in the same year, the acreage for cotton production was 37 million hectares. Also, what matters and what is by and large ignored in the public debate is that the price of energy plays a significant role, because modern agriculture is an energy-intensive industry. Between 20 and 40% of the variable cost of crop production are the result, directly or indirectly, of energy inputs. So, and this is what our energy economists keep telling us, namely that the times of cheap energy are over, and that the price of energy will be significantly